Hey, good morning, everybody. Crafting Journey here. That Journey Chick over on Instagram. And on my second YouTube channel, I'm known as The Leftovers. If you're watching back today on the replay, I went live a little early because I thought we would have something to watch in the Aaron Dean sentencing. But what happened there was they actually went live very early this morning to qualify a witness. In other words, it was an expert who the judge wanted to see if he was qualified to testify about what he's going to testify. Wasn't in front of me, but it's actually a psychiatrist or a psychologist that examined the Aaron Dean, the police officer, before he became a police officer to see if he was psychologically fit to be a police officer. And he said he was not. And that's what he sent over to the Fort Worth Police Department, and they hired him anyway. So that's going to be testimony that the jury will hear today during the sentencing phase. Although I think that's more of an onus on the police department for hiring him than it is on the defendant. Anyway, so the judge said, yes, you're qualified. And then the judge took some other he's hearing some other case right now. And then they'll go back and start the sentencing. So I don't think we're going to get to see much of that, depending on how long the sentencing or the sentencing, depending on how long the verdict lasts in the Midwife case. So that's what we're here today to watch, is the verdict in the Midwife case. I'm going to see if I can see if they're live yet. I don't think so. So I'm going to get off of here and try to find it. This one is being covered by Court TV, so I don't think that they're live yet. It's scheduled for 9 a.m. I'll go in there. Okay, they are not live yet, so we'll just hang on till they go live, and then we'll start the coverage. So I'm sitting here today. I am diamond painting. You can see all of my diamond paintings, not all of them. These are just a few. There's way more all the way around the room. This is the most recent Christmas painting. This is the one I finished, I don't know, a few weeks ago. So right now I'm working on the Black Lab, which is a landscape within the silhouette of a dog. It's really cool. So I'm almost done with that one. Probably finish that one up today while we're watching. Where is everybody? We're waiting for people to come in. I think everybody knows it's not live yet. Scheduled for 9 o'clock. That's if they're on time. I don't, let me pull up the other case, see if they're doing anything. We can bounce back and forth today. It's not a problem. I think this, no. Okay, that's not it. Okay, I'm just looking around YouTube, seeing what else is going on. Long crime. Okay. It doesn't look like there's anything going on in it yet. No. Nope. Still got a blank screen up there. Or, just the thumbnail up there. So we're waiting on Court TV for the verdict in the midwife delivery trial. The judge heard closing arguments yesterday and afterwards said he would rule today at 9 a.m. Hi, Sue. Hi, Robin. Welcome. Yeah, I'm just looking around because there's two different things going on, and nothing is going on. All right, first we got the Aaron Dean case. That's the Fort Worth police officer. He was found guilty yesterday of manslaughter, which carries a sentence of anywhere from 2 years to 20 years. He was facing murder charges, first-degree murder charges that would have been up to life in prison. So he's not looking at life in prison anymore. So today is the sentencing hearing. And I think the jury's going to be there and that they decide the sentence. I've not heard of this being done before, but so they're going to hear aggravating, mitigating circumstances, testimony. They'll hear from the families today. So they went early. They went live early this morning, and they were qualifying a witness, and that's not done in front of the jury. That's something that they just want to make sure that the person that's going to testify in front of the jury is qualified to testify. And so they had him basically say what he, come on the stand and give his qualifications. And the judge said, yes, he's qualified. So he'll be appearing in front of the jury today. And this guy's going to testify that he examined Aaron Dean prior to becoming a police officer and actually told the police department that he wasn't qualified to be psychologically, he was unfit to be a police officer, and they hired him anyway, which I think that's pretty interesting. So then we're also waiting for the sentencing in the Midwife case. That's the case of Angela Hawk, who is alleged to have committed felony child abuse during the delivery of a full-term infant at home delivery. She was a unlicensed midwife, and that goes on more than we think it does, really and truly. And it wasn't that she wasn't qualified. She just wasn't licensed. She had all kinds of, they found all of her certificates, I need coffee, for training that she had. And the parents were totally comfortable with her. But once the baby got stuck, it was a breech delivery, went horribly, horribly wrong. The baby came out brain dead, and they had to take the baby off life support. So, yeah. So they're blaming this midwife. So how are you, Robin? It's early morning where Robin is in Australia. Early morning or late at night? I don't know. I can't keep track of the times. The time zone difference. I need a light pad. There we go. All right, we should be getting something here soon on one of these channels. It's 8:58. Okay, we are waiting. Yep, nothing happening on either channel right now. Oh, it's 1:58 a.m. Oh my gosh, girl, go to sleep. Watch the replay. Well, I'm glad to have you, Robin, as always, of course. So what have you been working on these days? We have had a really cold start to the summer, still using my heater in the daytime. Really? Oh my goodness. And it's summertime there? Wow. That's not good. Not good. Oh my gosh, today it was like 28 degrees when I went out to walk the dogs. I look like that kid from the what's that movie? Christmas Story. I had my big puffer jacket on, and my scarf and my hat. I was like bundled. Never as exciting to watch replay. I know, and then you don't get to participate in the chat, and yeah, it's more fun watching it live. I agree. That's why I'm go live. Yeah. Let me just see if anything's going on. Because it is now 9 a.m. All right. So Court TV is now live, so I'm going to go to that courtroom. I'm going to go ahead and turn that feed on, and we'll see what's happening. Now, I don't hear anything yet. That's the prosecutor sitting there. So I don't think the judge is on the bench yet. Court never runs on time. Never. Ever. Well, luckily the wind has died down here, so you don't hear that howling window like yesterday. Sue says, I'm not blaming the midwife. I think the parents are at fault as they wouldn't listen to the doctors. And when she went into that bathroom, it sounds like the midwife told her, hey, I think the baby's coming. And she just ignored her and said, okay. And then she went in the bathroom and stayed for 10 minutes and delivered her own baby. To be honest, that's how it happened. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't think she's at fault either. I'd be in favor of a not guilty verdict here. Just my opinion. You know, everybody's got one, right? Unfortunately, the law in Nebraska is that you don't do births at home. But you know that the parents knew that. The parents went into this with full knowledge that this woman was not licensed. Okay, we got a judge. Now, how about a microphone? Do we have a microphone? Come on, turn the mic on.
Good morning, everyone.
All right, I'm going to mute myself while he's talking.
Before I announce the verdict, I want to acknowledge the attorneys in this case for their hard work and professionalism that they showed during this case. The attorneys presented their cases very well. For starters, Angela Hawk's actions were likely unlawful by her acting as a lay midwife in the home delivery of the nose baby. Under Nebraska law, her actions could be seen as the unlawful practice of medicine under the Uniform Credentialing Act and in violation of the Certified Nurse Midwifery Practice Act. Any violation of these acts would be a Class 3 misdemeanor for a first offense. Further, any person engaging in the practice of any profession or business without the appropriate credentials may be restrained by temporary and permanent injunctions. And finally, practice of such profession or operation of such business without a credential after receiving a cease and desist order from the director of the Department of Health and Human Services is a Class 3 felony. Angela Hawk, however, is charged with negligent child abuse resulting in death, a Class 2A felony under Nebraska Revised Stat Section 28-707. Also, the court notes that the parents in this case have certain constitutional rights involving their medical choices for home delivery of their baby, although the court recognizes that the parents' choices are not absolute. This court expresses no opinion on whether home births in general are wise or prudent. This is an issue for the prospective parents and the Nebraska legislature. Further, this case is not a civil case where the plaintiff has alleged that Angela Hawk acted negligently. This is a criminal case where the state has charged Angela Hawk with criminal negligent child abuse resulting in the heartrending death of Vera. There is a vast difference between civil negligence and criminal negligence. While it is true that Angela Hawk is not a licensed midwife, she does have education, training, and experience in childbirth. Under the facts of this case, the elements which the state must prove by evidence beyond a reasonable doubt in order to convict the defendant, Angela Hawk, of negligent child abuse resulting in death are: 1, that the defendant did cause or permit Vera to be placed in a situation that endangered her safety or physical health, or B, to deprived of necessary care, and 2, that the defendant did so negligently, and 3, that the defendant's conduct in doing so proximately caused the death to Vera, and 4, that the defendant did so on or about June 14th through June 15th, 2019 in Douglas County, Nebraska, and 5, that at said time, Vera was a minor child. Angela Hawk first argues that the state has failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was criminally negligent. Pursuant to Nebraska Revised Stat, Section 28-707 in parens 9, negligently refers to criminal negligence and means that Angela Hawk knew or should have known of the danger involved and acted recklessly with respect to the safety or physical health or necessary care of Vera. Recklessly means disregarding a substantial and unjustifiable risk that Vera's safety or health or necessary care would be endangered in circumstances in which disregarding this risk was a gross deviation from what a reasonable law-abiding person would have done. What makes this case very troubling for the court is to try to separate the rights of the parents to choose a home birth with the criminal charge against Angela Hawk. The Noes knew beforehand what Angela Hawk was all about, and they chose a home birth. In fact, the Noes rehired her after they tried a home delivery with the first child approximately 1.5 years earlier. At no time did Angela Hawk misrepresent herself. Once Vera was determined to be in a breech position, Angela Hawk gave the Noes the option of going to the hospital. It is unclear from this record whether Angela Hawk knew there was a prolapsed cord. Although Angela Hawk did not provide the Noes with all the risks associated with the breech baby, it was the Noes' choice, and they chose to continue with the birth at home. Some 30 minutes or so later, Emily Noes started to deliver Vera. What happened next was tragic. But everyone involved in this case, from the Noes, Angela Hawk, Mickey, the firefighters and paramedics, and the doctors and the nurses at the hospital, acted to the best of their abilities to save Vera. In applying the elements outlined above to the case before the court cannot find that the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Angela Hawk acted criminally, that is, negligently caused or permitted the minor child Vera to be placed in a situation that endangered her safety or physical health or deprived her of necessary care. The court finds Angela Hawk not guilty. Because the court has found that Angela Hawk's actions were not criminally negligent, the court will not address the other issues raised by her. It is therefore ordered that the defendant, Angela Hawk, is found to be not guilty. I will file this verdict with full citations momentarily, and the parties are excused.
Thank you, Ron.
You're welcome.
That is the perfect result, I believe. I think he was absolutely correct. The parents made the choice. Wow. I love when the court gets it right. I really do. This poor woman has been put through hell. Now she can go home to her husband and her 6 children, who she was homeschooling when all this went down, and she was locked up. Oh. I'm assuming that's her husband. Oh my God. He's in the picture. Oh my God. Very interesting. Now, if you guys want, I can switch over to the other case. That's up to you guys. The sentencing. We can watch some of that live. Okay, I'm looking for the other case now. All right, let's find it. Here we go. So this is the guy that was qualified this morning. Psychologist, I believe.
In this particular case with this defendant, where did that information come from?
It came from the agency, Fort Worth Police Department.
And so the personal history that you're reviewing from the Fort Worth Police Department, what kinds of information does that have that is helpful to you?
It basically provides just an overview of the person's background. It's information that they have provided to the department, the agency, on their various background issues, employment, any legal history, that type of thing.
When you say they, are we talking about, in this case, it would be the information provided by the defendant to the police department?
Yes.
Prior jobs?
Yes.
Different types of, if there's been any issues in the past as far as any legal issues, any offenses, incidents, things like that?
Correct.
Where they went to school?
Yes.
All right. Past employment, past education, those types of things?
Yes.
All types of biographical information?
Yes.
So in this case, did you review the personal history information from the Fort Worth Police Department pertaining to this particular defendant?
Yes.
So after you reviewed that information, and you said that there are some other forms that are filled out, what other forms are filled out, sir?
When they come to the office, they fill out the consent forms for the evaluation. They fill out just a brief information sheet that lists their name, date of birth, phone number, email address, that type of thing.
And did this defendant fill out your background information form in this case?
Yes, we provide them with a background information form when they get to the office that they fill out before the interview.
And so when they're filling that information out, are you looking over the information that's provided by the Fort Worth Police Department?
Yes, or I've already looked over it before that time.
So after they fill out the information, the background information form for your office in the lobby, what's the next thing they do?
So the next thing they do is start in on the psychological testing. So they complete their psychological testing. Once they're through with that, then they see me for an interview.
So let's go through the different processes for the psychological testing. Take me through the two different types of personality or psychological testing that is done.
Sure. So in conjunction with the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, they provide some standards with what type of testing needs to be done. In particular, they state that there needs to be at least one assessment of psychopathology or abnormal psychological functioning, and then also a test of normal or universal personality traits. So we conduct the testing of both of those things, two different type of tests. In this case, he completed the PAI, which is the Personality Assessment Inventory, which is a test of psychopathology, general psychological functioning, personality functioning. And then he also completed what's called the NEO-PI3, which is the test of universal or normal personality traits. So it's not looking at psychopathology, it's just looking by self-report how he assesses himself in terms of general traits, like how extroverted he thinks he is, how conscientious he thinks he is, that type of thing.
Can you explain to us in more depth what psychopathology is?
Psychopathology is just an abnormal psychological functioning.
And those two tests, are those accepted as, are they required to have a general psychopathology as well as a personality test when conducting these pre-employment interviews for law enforcement?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And are these the most common that are used, the personality assessment inventory and the NEO personality inventory?
I'd say they're definitely in the group of what's most commonly used.
How are these two assessments conducted? Where are they done?
They're done in our testing room via computer administration. So the items are on the screen, they're responding on the computer, it follows along as they go.
And about how long does it take to complete? Let's just first talk, is there one that's done before the other one?
It doesn't have to be. Typically, they take the personality assessment inventory first with how our office administers them, but they can be done in either order.
So let's just first talk about the PAI, the personality assessment inventory. The test that's determining the psychopathology of the individual. How long does that take?
It's not timed, so it can vary depending on how long it takes a person to read the items and respond, but in general, typically around 45 minutes to an hour.
And can you give us some examples of the types of questions or how this assessment is done?
I can't give you the specific questions due to the publication issues, but I can tell you just in general, there are statements. Each item is a statement that you then respond to. So a statement might be something like, I enjoy spending time outdoors, or I enjoy spending time with my friends, or I have trouble sleeping. Just a number of various statements that you then respond to, whether or not for you, that is false, not true at all, slightly true, mostly true, or very true. So there's a gradient that you can respond to for each item.
And whether that's done before or after the NEO personality inventory, regardless, what is as far as the NEO personality inventory, how is that administered? The same way? Same
way. It's a computer administration. Again, there's items that they respond to, that they have a range of responses. For that one, they're responding anywhere from strongly disagree to strongly agree. There's a range.
And so overall, after these two assessments are done, is there a result of some sort that's given to you?
Yes, there's a report for each assessment that's provided.
Is that provided to you before or after you interview the defendant?
Before. So I review the testing results before in case I want to review any of that or ask any follow-up questions with them. It's also required as part of the TCOL instruction that the interview has to come after the testing.
And so overall, the personality assessment inventory, the NEO personality inventory, are both of those, would you agree with, based on self-reporting, whatever they answer, and then it's reported to you?
Yes, but the PAI is a little different in that it assesses the extent, what we call validity or impression management. It assesses the extent to which a person is trying to present themselves maybe better than they are or with little faults, or if they're trying to present themselves as having more problems than is actually present. The NEO doesn't do that.
And how are there those safeguards? How does that show up on a test? If somebody's trying to seem better or to seem like they have more problems?
There are specific scales, what are called validity scales on that type of test, to where it analyzes their response pattern and it gives you a score to reflect how likely that kind of issue might be present or not.
And depending the type of, I guess, the request given, whether it be pre-employment or maybe for court. Have you seen that before where individuals will try to act like they have more problems or more issues?
Many times.
Have you seen where people try to also, I guess, fake the test out or over exaggerate how good they are?
Many times.
Try to kind of fake out the test.
There definitely can be some significant positive or negative impression management depending on the context of the evaluation, yes.
And so the positive impression management, if you do see that, how do you make sure that the test is still valid?
Well, there's a range of what's acceptable for that inherent in the test. So it interprets the level that that's at, and then it gives you some information in terms of if it's at a certain level, then the test is considered invalid. If it's below that level, then the interpretation suggests that you should interpret the rest of the test with some caution, that there might be some distortion here, but it's still able to be interpreted. So the test guides that.
All right. And so whenever you did review the NEO personality inventory and the results and the PAI results, did you have any particular areas that you explored with the defendant during the interview?
Yes.
Let's start, is there one that you prefer to start with as far as whether the personality assessment inventory or the NEO?
The personality assessment inventory is the first test that he took and the first test that I discussed with him, if you want to go in order.
Yeah, let's go in order. Let's start there. And so did you discuss, what particular things did you discuss within the PAI?
Well, given that there were indications from the PAI of grandiosity and some interpersonal difficulties, including that this person would likely to be seen as domineering or over-controlling, interpersonal difficulties related to that, that they might be someone, these profile types tend to be those who are very concerned with sort of the facade of superiority and not appearing passive or weak in any way. So those type of things, given that they suggested some possible problem areas, I asked him about those type of things.
Will you define the grandiosity to us, please?
Sure. Grandiosity is just an inflated sense of self. So an inflated sense of your own abilities, your own qualities, things that you see, like arrogance, entitlement, those type of things are what we think of with grandiosity.
And what about domineering? Define that for us.
So domineering is someone who tends to be overbearing or controlling of others.
And superiority, you said with superiority. Describe that to us. Can you define that more for me?
Sure. So just again, it's the idea of having a very high opinion of yourself and being very concerned about appearing weak or submissive at all on the outside to others.
And so when you see these particular personality traits, what do you discuss with them?
Well, I asked him a number of follow-up questions in terms of to try to get from his perspective how he saw himself in this way, his own assessment of his abilities, and how he would assess his interaction with others.
Okay, and give me some examples of how you ask those questions.
So I asked him to rate himself on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is the worst person possible, 5 is an average person, 10 is a perfect person with no flaws. I had him rate himself on that scale.
And what was his result?
He gave himself a 9.
A 9 out of 10.
Yes.
Is that, in your experience, a higher rating than you typically see?
Yes.
And so is that consistent with what that particular personality test had assessed as being grandiose and having a higher inflated view of yourself?
Yes.
Did he indicate why he's not a 10 out of 10?
He indicated that he would be a 10 out of 10 if not for what he categorized as some stupid things that he had done in the past to, as he described it, piss people off.
And what other types of things did you discuss with him regarding this grandiosity portion of the personality test?
Well, I asked him just in terms of any faults or flaws that he would see in himself or things that he felt like he might need to improve upon. He said he had noted on my form that his bad fault or flaw was chewing ice, And then when I asked him about, are there any, flaws or things you would like to improve upon or could improve upon, he indicated that he felt like he was too messy and he could be neater. I asked him if there was anything else that he might need to improve upon, and he said no.
And your opinion is saying that someone's messy and chewing ice. Do you typically see people have more that they'd like to improve upon in their own lives?
Typically, it's not out of the ordinary in this type of evaluation where someone is up for a job that they're not presenting you with everything negative about themselves, but I typically see a little bit more than this for sure.
All right, and then what else did you ask him about in terms of the grandiosity we were discussing?
So I asked him just about various occupations or skills and whether or not he felt that he could do these things or not do these things. I went through a number, some of which he said he could do, some of which he said he couldn't. Things that he said that he could do was that he felt like he could fly a commercial airliner. When asked why he felt like he could do that, he said that he had played a flight simulator game when he was a kid. He said that he could teach an advanced calculus class. Things that he said that he could not do was that he was not qualified to be president. He could not perform brain surgery. He indicated that he could not teach an advanced economics class.
But he could fly a commercial aircraft.
Yes.
From what you reviewed as his personal history, background, employment, education, did he have any pilot training?
Not that I'm aware of.
So based on the playing of those flight simulator game, he believed he could pilot an aircraft.
That's the way I took it, yes.
And is that consistent with somebody that has an overinflated view of themselves
Very much so.
and their abilities?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what's next? What else, as far as your evaluation, did you see and discuss with them?
In terms of the testing, I did ask him, since there were some indications on there of this overbearing, over-controlling type of interaction with others. He said that he had never been told that he was too dominant or over-controlling or that he was impatient. He indicated that he is able to take charge, but he is also does just fine with being submissive to others. Basically reported that he had never had any problems or issues with that.
Did that surprise you?
Yes and no. I would say, given his grandiosity, I wasn't expecting to hear a lot from him that maybe painted himself in a negative light. But I was somewhat surprised that if that was his personality style, that he might not have ever heard that, at least from someone else, even if he didn't agree with it.
All right. And so what else was discussed with him as far as the concerns that you saw on the test?
The majority of my discussion with him in terms of concern of testing revolved around those two areas, his grandiosity and then his interpersonal style and difficulties that might result from that. That was the main focus of the follow-up from the testing, because those were the two main problematic issues.
And when he talked about rating himself, and he would be a 10 with the exception of some stupid things that offended or bothered people, did he go through and talk about the specifics of what those were?
He provided 3 examples, yes.
Did you also, in reviewing his personal history from the Fort Worth Police Department, were some of those things mentioned?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go through those if we can. Tell me one of those things that he mentioned in the testing and in talking to you.
So one of the things that he noted was that he had had an incident where he'd gone into a fast.
Yes.
Everyone may be seated. Ms. Dean,
Judge, before we get into that, I want to be clear on the record. Our first objection here is that we had a motion to let the these matters that was granted by the court before we began testimony in this case. The court instructed the state to approach the bench, let the court know before they intended to go into any of these matters, and they were preparing to go into it before they were interrupted with an objection, without approaching the bench, without giving the court an opportunity to rule on these matters.
All right. Let's go. Ms. Dean.
Okay, I was just asking you questions about the particulars of what was reported in the file, the personal history file from Fort Worth Police Department. Can you talk about the very first item?
Sure. So the first thing that we discussed was related to an incident where he was in a fast food restaurant and he had an airsoft gun that was on his hip. Evidently, police were called and talked to him about that. He wasn't charged with anything, but was told that that wasn't a good idea. The next thing that he discussed, he said that it was about a year later. All of these occurred in his early 20s. He indicated was another incident with an airsoft gun where he and a friend were playing, shooting at each other in an area that was at or near a church or a residential area near a creek. He said that there was a homeowner, I guess, that had seen them and had called police. Police had showed up and gave them a stern talking to, is the way that he described it in this personnel packet.
And I had asked you earlier when you were outside the presence of a jury during the 705 hearing, if you reviewed, and actually the defense counsel asked you as well, if you had reviewed this background information with the Fort Worth Police Department, and you had answered yes, correct?
Yes.
And you also had shown in, I believe it was that's part of the psychological evaluation, is that you do an interview with him to discuss those matters, correct?
To discuss matters of his history is part of it, yes.
Okay. All right. And then did you also discuss with him a matter that pertained to him being a student at UTA?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about that.
So he indicated, I saw in his packet that he had a history of assault. And so I asked him about that. He indicated that when he was in his early 20s, he was at a college library, that there was a girl that was flirting with him, that he said some things to her and then touched her, and then she filed charges, and that he had to pay a fine and complete a sexual harassment course or class.
Now, was there a particular way that those different things, those incidences, in the way that he described them, that was consistent with what you had seen on these assessments?
Yes.
In what way, sir?
I felt like that he was pretty flippant in the way that he described it.
Would that be consistent with someone that has an overinflated view of themselves?
Yes.
Would that be consistent with the overall assessments, both of the assessments that you reviewed, and with the way he responded to those incidences?
Yes, and with the way he interacted with me as well.
And when we were outside the presence of the jury, I didn't go through each one of these specifics, but the defense counsel asked you to go through and interpret some of your handwriting so that we could understand what you said on these pages?
Yes.
Okay. Is there some handwriting at the very back of the background information form? Actually, kind of handwriting all over, I guess, these 5 pages?
Yes, there's handwriting at the end of that form of his, where there's his signature, and the last bit is on the next page where there's handwriting there as well as a part of the summary.
Looking now here at the Fort Worth Police Department's background information. Did you also ask him about whether or not, or was it, I guess, provided to you that he had applied to other police departments before?
Yes, and I asked him about that as well.
And did he indicate whether he had ever applied to Fort Worth Police Department before?
Yes.
And what was the result of him applying to the police department before?
He told me that he had applied in around 2014 or 2015, that he had passed a psychological evaluation, but that he had withdrawn due to concerns about his physical fitness at the time.
And did you look through in the background information for Fort Worth Police Department whether he had ever applied to Reno, Nevada Police Department?
Yes,
And what was the result of his application to that police department?
he failed the physical.
Okay. And had he also applied to the Grand Prairie Police Department?
Yes.
And when was that?
That was in 2016, I believe, per his packet.
Was there also some information in this background form from the police department that he had been in trouble before for punctuality, being late to work?
Yes.
Okay. Was there also information about him having several traffic citations and several, I guess, a mention regarding his insurance, his auto insurance?
Yes.
All right. Now, when you asked, or when you reviewed this background information, did he put the 2 instances with the gun and the incident involving UTA, are those both also in that background information?
The information that he filled out for my office?
No, the information he filled out for the Fort Worth Police Department.
Yes.
And is that also in the information that he filled out with you?
Well, in the information that he filled out with me, he noted his assault. There was nothing that he wrote on his background form related to the incidents with the airsoft guns, but I did talk to him and ask him about that.
And why was that important to you to talk to him about that?
Well, just because they were interactions that he had had with law enforcement in the past, and that to assess his behavior and judgment at the time and what occurred.
Did he provide the psychological evaluation from Fort Worth Police Department that he had said he had taken and passed?
No.
If he had provided that to you, would that be a part of the file that you would have provided to me?
Yes.
Did he indicate, we've explained this a bit, but I want to get a little bit more specific since we're outside the presence of the jury. When he talked about the incident in college at UTA with a female, did he indicate to you whether she, the female, was being flirtatious with him as well?
That's the way he described it.
Did it appear to you that he was minimizing, or I guess you used the term flippant, minimizing or being flippant about this prior incident?
Yes.
Did these things that we've mentioned specifically involving the guns and the incident with UTA, did those all appear to be consistent with someone that bears the same personality traits as this defendant?
Yes.
And Judge, for purposes of this record, since we're outside the presence of the jury, I wasn't planning on getting into him being late to work. I wasn't planning on getting into him using his auto insurance for traffic citations for any, I think, speeding or wrecks. But I just wanted to flesh that out since we were outside the presence of the jury. But for purposes of this hearing, I'll pass the witness.
Thank you. Mr. Gill,
Don't have any additional questions, but I have some objections.
go ahead.
Not only did the state violate the court's ruling on the motion in limine, but they're also attempting to get into matters that they did not provide to us in pre-trial disclosure.
Okay, let me hear about that.
We were not provided any notice that there was any bad act involving an airsoft gun or being spoken to by police or anything along those lines. So we would object to the state going into anything regarding that. We would
Response?
also,
I'm sorry, response?
May I respond? Yes.
Yeah.
thank you, Judge. Yeah, specifically, we did, and I can go through, does Your Honor have a copy of our?
I do not have the gym system up right now, so.
And I can go through, it's actually quite lengthy, Your Honor, so I may need just a minute. It's 13 pages. But I believe specifically I did go through and discuss in the 404 notice that was provided to defense back on April of 2022. And just to be clear also, so that you know, Judge, we actually didn't provide this into GEMS or e-file it for a particular reason. We had an agreement with defense counsel that the 404 extraneous notice would be provided via email and acknowledged.
Then I wouldn't have a copy then, would I?
That's correct. But I did go through and discuss the various traffic violations. Also, it's shown that he had committed the offense of assault in college. That's also mentioned. I talked about the receiving disciplinary action from employers, and I believe that we also discussed his, if you look for defense counsel, on page 12, it discussed him having, I discussed a particular other witness, but about him shooting guns, having guns, being very proficient with guns and overly confident about guns, always being the person that wanted to protect others with his gun at the church. And I will probably just need a few more minutes, Judge, as far as if I gave into the specifics about the underlying incidences that are in the background report that this witness reviewed. I did give notice that he had failed the psychological evaluation and had those particular personality traits. Those are things that are all considered within that packet of information that he's testified about. All of that packet of information was provided to defense counsel, the background information, as well as his failure of the psych eval. That was actually ordered, that entire file was ordered by Judge Hagerman at this point, months and months and months ago.
All right, I've got some concerns about the airsoft stuff. So I'm going to sustain your objection. Don't go into the airsoft guns with this witness. Okay, the UTA situation, that's fine. But the airsoft guns, stay away from.
well, I have further objections about this supposed DTA matter.
All right, go ahead. I didn't give that to you.
That is that this witness can state his opinion based upon the same opinion that he's already stated based upon his testing and the other portions of his interview without going into the underlying facts of that incident. He reaches the same opinion based upon that incident that he reached upon his general overall testing and the other things told to him by the defendant, which is.
So your objection is into the UTA deal is not the fact that the defendant was charged with that, but going into the underlying facts.
Yes, sir.
Well, and I don't intend to get, the only testimony, and by the way, we do intend on calling the victim of that particular case, and I think she'll be here or may already be here. So we'll get into specifics at that point. But as far as specifics, I mean, it is the information that the defendant told him, and it's part of what he was asking and trying to clarify on as far as what the results of the personality traits were, his minimization and flippant. I don't intend to get into anything more specific about what happened with this witness, with the exception of asking him with what he told you happened, a simple assault dealing with a female or an assault dealing with a female, did he minimize that? Did he appear to be flippant about that? And did he appear to indicate that she was also being flirtatious with him, which is consistent with why he believes it to be flippant and minimization of it. But I don't intend to get into anything more.
All right, I'll let you ask very general questions in regard to Dr. Clayton's evaluation of his responses.
Okay.
Okay. I don't want him getting into the underlying facts because he's not a fact witness in regard to that charge. You have a further objection. So your objection would be overruled. To that objection, yes.
We further object that any probative value of that matter is substantially outweighed by prejudicial effect, especially since this witness is already basing his opinion on other matters.
That objection is overruled. You may have a running objection to that also. Are we ready for the jury?
State's ready.
No.
Okay.
I'd ask the court to inquire if Emmanuel Mata, MATA, is present in the courtroom. If they are, I'd ask to be brought forward and sworn and placed under the rules.
Is there Emmanuel Mata present in the courtroom? There does not appear to be Emmanuel Mata.
What's your name, sir? Anthony. Anthony, what's your last name? I'd ask Anthony Lasone to be brought forward and sworn in, Your Honor.
Come up, please, sir. No, I need to swear him.
Just, yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now, you know what? Just come up to the rail. Just stand right there. Raise your right hand for me. Solemnly swear or affirm testimony given this cause to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Sir.
Would you tell me your first and last name and spell it for my court reporter, please?
Anthony Lasson, Anthony, last name is Lasson, Lazd, and Zebra O-N.
You have been sworn as a witness in this case, and there is a rule of procedure in effect that says that you cannot be in court while you're testifying, unless you're testifying. You're not to discuss this case with anyone else in anticipating of you being called as a witness. So if you'll remain outside in the hallway and do not talk to anybody out in the hallway, do you understand? All right, thank you very much.
One second, on that.
Sure. Everybody ready?
State's ready.
Let's go.
Judge, just one more matter, bench real quick.
Okay.
Everyone may be seated. Thank you.
Okay, I think before we took a break, I was asking you some questions about his minimization of his conduct. I want to ask you about the incident involving UTA. Just specifically, or actually more generally, did he seem to minimize whatever happened back in college to you?
Yes,
And did he appear to be, what was his attitude about it in general?
I thought he was pretty flippant in describing it, minimization and flippant.
Would that be consistent with his personality traits that you had seen so far?
Yes, you would expect to see someone who's high in narcissism be quick to take credit, slow to take responsibility, that kind of thing. And that's kind of what I felt like I saw when he was talking about that.
Now, the jury's heard you refer to grandiosity, but the term narcissistic, that is a term that we haven't yet defined. Can you tell us what that means, sir?
Sure. So and those two are certainly related, but narcissism has to do with not only a person's sense of self, so they have an overinflated sense of themselves and their own abilities, but it also relates to how they see and view others. So not only do they tend to have a high view of themselves, they don't tend to have a very high view of others or their opinions. They often have a low tolerance for disagreement. They tend to be overbearing or domineering with other people. They can be manipulative at times. They certainly have an issue with taking in information that doesn't agree with them. In that way, their judgment and perception tends to be limited to their own ideas of reference.
Now I want to move to the NEO personality assessment. Did you also, well, actually, before we get to that, we talked earlier about the PAI validity scales. Was there some concern regarding this defendant's positive impression?
Yes, he had what is categorized as a moderate degree of positive impression management. So not to the extent that would invalidate the test, but to the extent to where the test interpretation suggests that you need to take that into account, that there's likely some minimization that's going on here of any type of faults or difficulties.
And so the results of that particular test may actually underrepresent the concerns in those areas.
Correct.
Because he has, I guess, overstated, or in his responses, that would have affected that particular section.
That's correct.
All right. Now let's talk about the NEO evaluation. Is there anything else in the PAI as far as in your report?
No, the main things from the PAI that were noted we discussed in terms of his grandiosity and interpersonal difficulties.
And now let's move to the NEO evaluation. Or actually, let me ask you one question real quick about the particular clinical scale. Part of that personality test that we've been discussing, was there either a concern, or at least the notation there was a moderate elevation in this defendant's aggression or verbal aggression?
Yes, that's part of the interpersonal issues that I was discussing before. He did have a moderate elevation on a scale related to verbal aggression.
Can that be problematic if you are seeking employment to be a police officer?
Very much so.
Now, let's move to the NEO. Explain that to us. What were some of the findings regarding that particular test?
So the NEO, again, it differs from the PAI in that it doesn't assess for impression management. So if there's some indication that some impression management is going on, it really limits how much you can interpret this type of test beyond it just being their own perception of themselves as a self-report. And in this case, given that it did appear that he was exercising some positive impression management and some guardedness, there wasn't a whole lot to be gleaned from the NEO beyond the way that he saw himself. But it certainly was an indication of whether or not there's any psychopathology there or not.
And so overall, was there, you mentioned earlier that the NEO doesn't have an ability to determine if there's some sort of over-representation, or I guess the self-inflate or the positive impression, correct?
That's correct. It doesn't measure for that.
Okay. So then how do we determine that it is valid?
Well, the validity on the NEO, it's not designed to measure its validity in that way in terms of impression management. It's designed to just be a self-report. So the validity on the NEO basically asks them if they understood the questions and if they responded honestly, and then it looks at how many responses they might not have entered. If there's a certain amount of items you don't enter, then the protocol is considered invalid. But it doesn't look at validity to the extent of impression management the way the PAI does. It's just designed as a self-report or self-reflection of how they see themselves on these personality traits.
And so were the results of the NEO personality test consistent with the results seen on the other personality tests?
They were, in terms of, you did see some indication of grandiosity and then some interpersonal issues where this person might be more likely to be critical or antagonistic or domineering at times with others. So that, in that way, it was consistent.
As far as your report, did it appear to be that he had indications of a forceful and dominant personality traits? Or
Yes,
style, rather.
yes.
And we've heard you talk about domineering and dominant personality traits. Why is someone that has a forceful or dominant personality trait or style concerning for being a Fort Worth police officer?
Well, in a number of ways. It certainly impacts their judgment and decision-making, but even more directly, it interacts with or limits their interpersonal functioning. So individuals like that tend to have a low stress tolerance, low tolerance for disagreement, not very good at conflict resolution, others, just interpersonal difficulties in general with others, being sort of critical or uncaring or unsympathetic to others. Those things are all issues that can be problematic in this type of job because you're dealing with others on a daily basis, both coworkers and the public.
Was there mention to you involving his previous employment and seeking employment with other police departments?
Yes,
And did he seek employment in other police departments?
yes.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, he reported that he had previously applied to this department, Fort Worth Police Department, the one he was seeing me for, in 2014 or 2015. He indicated that he had passed a psychological evaluation as part of that application, but that he had withdrawn due to concerns about his own physical fitness. He didn't tell me about any others, but there were others noted in his packet, which included that he had previously applied with Reno Police Department and had failed a physical, and that he had also applied to Grand Prairie Police Department, but had withdrawn that to seek this position with Fort Worth.
Now, if he had taken a psychological evaluation with Fort Worth, would that have been provided to you prior to your assessment?
Typically, yes. If the agency has a prior evaluation, it's up to them what they provide, but typically we get that type of information.
Had that been provided to you?
No.
Okay, and so the personality traits that you have discussed so far, are those traits that you would expect to diminish or go away over time without any treatment or intervention?
Typically, no.
Why not?
Well, because personality traits or structure tends to be, especially once you reach adulthood, tend to be fairly stable over time. You can see some changes in behaviors, things that you can address in terms of symptoms or behaviors, but once personality structure, once it's established, doesn't tend to change night and day. You don't typically see someone that's highly extroverted at age 30 and then at age 40, they're all of a sudden very, very introverted, unless something big has happened, whether it be treatment or a life event or injury or something like that.
And the particular traits of the overinflated view of themselves, the forceful dominant personality, would that be concerning in terms of how they view, for example, a call when they're responding as a Fort Worth police officer, how they view the steps that they take?
Yes.
Objection, that's beyond the scope of expertise.
Sustained.
And overall, what was your conclusion of this defendant's psychological evaluation?
My conclusion was that he was not psychologically suitable to serve as a police officer,
And why is that?
because the results had suggested that he had a narcissistic personality style that would inhibit his judgment, decision-making, interpersonal abilities, and would make him more likely to engage in behaviors that could put himself and others at risk.
When we called you about this particular case and you learned that this defendant was involved in a criminal case involving the death of an individual, did you know what happens, or do you
Judge,
ever
we're
know?
gonna object to this. This is something that wasn't disclosed to us previously.
Let me hear the question.
Do you know what happens to those after they take their psychological evaluation?
No.
Let me answer that question.
No, I submit my report to the agency, and then that's typically the end of the process for me, unless they call and have questions.
Would it be surprising to you that someone that bears these particular personality traits then is involved in this type of offense?
No.
Why not?
Well, because again, the higher you are in narcissism, the more likely that you are to engage in things that maybe poor judgment, decision-making, problems interpersonally, overconfidence can impede their judgment. They can tend to be, the higher you are in this, you tend to be more reckless, less prudent, just in general.
Oh, and you mentioned earlier in your testimony that in order to be a police officer with Fort Worth, you have to get a passing psychological evaluation, correct?
Yes.
And so do you know how he obtained a passing psychological evaluation after you saw him in March of 2017?
I mean, I would assume, because I know the appeal process, I haven't viewed any evaluations or the procedure on that he underwent.
When you just said appeal procedure, tell us what you mean by that.
So just in general, typically the way this works with an agency or department in Texas is that if a person does not pass a psychological, then they can appeal. And as part of that appeal, they see a panel of 3 psychologists, psychiatrists, or doctors who are able to evaluate this. If all 3 of those psychiatrists or psychologists unanimously say that this person is psychologically suitable, then they can pass and move on from that. If not, then the process stops from there.
And in your opinion, are there, when you say that he does not appear to be psychologically suitable, do you have characterizations of whether you can pass or fail a psych eval?
It's a judgment based on the evaluator, but there's not a test score or anything like that. It's just my judgment based on the assessment and the job description of what's being asked for here.
Are there times when there is a clear, I'm going to use the term pass, but clearly that they are suitable for the employment, and times that it's very clear they are not?
Yes.
Are there also a category where they might be a little bit in the middle, where there's a little gray? Maybe they could, maybe they couldn't. You have some concerns, they might be okay.
Yes, I would say that's where these tend to fall in those 3 categories.
Where did he fall?
He falls in the clearly not suitable.
Cross-examination.
Dr. Clayton, if I said that the practice of psychology is highly subjective, would that be
I think it depends on what aspect of the practice of psychology you're referring to, but it definitely involves, from my standpoint, it involves a clinical judgment that I'm making based on the evaluation. Yes.
And that's subjective, isn't it? There's not a measurement tool that you can use to evaluate someone's psychological makeup, is there?
There's not anything like an X-ray that shows you one thing definitively. There's testing you do, interviews you do. From all of that, you try to form an informed clinical opinion. Yes.
And you make your living by examining people and examining situations and developing these opinions, isn't that right?
Yes.
And other psychologists do the same thing.
Yes.
And you know that if Aaron Dean became a Fort Worth police officer, that it was the opinion of 3 other psychologists that he was in fact fit for duty. Is that right?
Yes.
So 3 other psychologists reached an opinion different from yours. Is that right?
Yes.
And that would have been around the same time that you talked to Mr. Dean. Isn't that right?
I don't know the time frame, but I assumed it was pretty close in time to when I saw him.
And that appeal process is allowed because the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement recognizes that the decision and the opinions made by psychologists in this realm are highly subjective. Isn't that right?
That's my understanding.
So is that the only time that you've ever talked to Aaron Dean?
Yes.
You didn't ever see him before that?
No.
Did you ever see him after that?
No.
You mentioned that there were a couple of statements that he made that were brought out by the prosecutor that you took note of, one of which had to do with the fact that he believed that he could teach calculus. Is that right?
Yes, that he could teach an advanced calculus class.
Did you know at that time that he has a college degree in physics?
Yes.
And that still seemed unusual to you, that he could teach calculus?
Yes.
Have you ever had a gun pointed at you?
No.
The matters that you talked about here today in front of this jury, one of those matters had to do with an incident that took place at UTA, is that right?
Yes.
And that matter was brought to your attention in the packet that you received from the Fort Worth Police Department, is that right?
Yes.
So the Fort Worth Police Department knew about an alleged incident at UTA,
Yes.
is that right? So that was in the Fort Worth Police Department's packet of information in their hiring pack that they would have had access to when they hired Aaron Dean, correct?
Yes.
We pass the witness.
Redirect.
Can I just 1 second?
Yes, ma'am.
We don't have any questions, Your Honor.
May Dr. Clayton be finally excused.
No objection from the state.
Subject to recall.
If you're available for this, then you have that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, y'all have a short break tonight here, so give me a few minutes, all right? Let's take about 15 minutes, see you in a little bit. All right, we'll start at 10:25, everybody, 10:25.
Hey, everybody. Because I'm under the, I've got a thumbnail up that talks about the verdict for the Midwife case. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and end this live feed, and I will start a new live feed at 10:25 when they come back from the break, and under a different thumbnail so that it doesn't confuse people. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I'll see you guys at 10:25. Look for the Aaron Dean thumbnail.